What's up, Game Devs? T-Chan here, and welcome to episode 34 of Game Dev Loadout, where I chat with the best people in the game industry 7 days a week. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast for a new daily episode filled with inspiring stories. And now today's featured guest is Stone Librande. He is the lead designer for Riot Games, has worked in the game industry for 15 years on games such as SimCity, Spore, and Diablo 3. He also teaches game design courses at Carnegie Mellon University ETC program, which stands for Entertainment Technology Center, and he runs design seminars around the world. So go ahead, Stone, give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
I remember even like at 5 years old making games, card games out of my father's old business cards and things like that. But I never really thought of it as a career. It's just a hobby. It's just something I always did. I always remember doing. So when I went to college, I got interested in film and animation, eventually computer graphics. But programming was probably like the thing that I felt like I was going to be doing for most of my life. And then I had a chance to work at Blizzard. That just kind of as a programmer, and then that just kind of opened the doors and eventually kind of moved from programming into designing full time.
And when it comes to the lead designer, what exactly do you do during the game development?
Yeah, mostly the easiest way to think about it is like as an architect of a building. And so the architect's job would be to make the plans that then the contractors are then going to build the building. So the architect himself is not going to pick up the hammer and the saws and start going out and making the building. But the contractors wouldn't really have a good guide as to what to do unless those plans existed. That's pretty close to what's going on in game development with a big team. You need the plans. You have a lot of people working on a lot of very specialized tasks. And somebody's got to like make sure that everybody's building the same building, that they're all working together. So the plans that I come up with usually they're not just my ideas where I'm like, here's a cool idea, everybody do this. It's more like working with the team, figuring out their needs, and then trying to craft a set of documents that the team would then be able to follow and understand as they work through the production process.
Okay, and what do you think is something that we should know about your expertise that most people don't know about?
Well, part of it, I think, is that a lot of people that I talk to who want to become game designers, they really think that the game designer is the person who just kind of sits back and is creative. And a designer really isn't about that. A designer is more about taking other people's ideas and then turning them into actionable plans that other people will be able to follow. So I don't just go into work and just think of cool things all day long. It's much more other people like marketing, executives. The programmers have their own constraints. The technology has constraints. And so you're given all of these constraints that you have to work with. And then you figure out like taking all of those problems, how do you then sort them into a solution?
And if people had to teach themselves game design, what resources would you recommend they use?
Probably just you need to just make games. And I've talked to a lot of people who are like, well, but I can't make a game. I don't have the right computer. I need a big team, or I'm not a good artist. And my response, and in the classes that I teach at CMU, it's really like there's no computers in that class. It's all just about here's a deck of cards, here's a set of dice, go make games. And what I found is like people who are really game designers in the sense that it's just their passion, it's their calling, they're just making games all the time, whether they have a computer in front of them or not. So you might be at a restaurant and then you're waiting for the food to arrive, and then you pull out the sugar packets and the salt and pepper shakers and you're making a game while you're waiting. Or you're at a campsite and you find some sticks and some rocks and suddenly you're making a game in the forest with the trees. And that's to me is like, okay, that person's a game designer. Like they can't help themselves.
I actually never thought about that. A game designer is always designing regardless if they have a computer or not.
Yeah, and it's like the difference between like, do you want to be a game designer or do you want to be a computer game designer? Because those things are different. Like, I think anybody can be a game designer. In fact, if you look at just, you go to a playground and you look at the kids, it's like they're all designing games right there on the fly. They're not pulling out rule sheets and following somebody else's rules. They're just making up games and as they run around. So it's something that everybody can do. It's just not everybody can do computer game design, which is different. But you can learn a lot about game design just by making, non-electronic games.
Is it okay if you take us through the process of your students? You say you use flashcards and dice. How exactly does that work when the students use it?
Yeah, so it's not flashcards, it's just like a deck of cards, or just a deck of playing
Oh,
cards.
okay.
But it's a semester long course, so I probably don't have time to go into a lot of detail. But in general, it would be something like, here's a deck of cards, and you got 4 people, and here's a bunch of plastic dinosaurs. Go make a game, and just kind of sit down, and then they start to play with the pieces that they have, and you have the constraints on them, like it has to have this deck of cards and it has to have these dinosaurs in it, and you just kind of see what they do with that. It's a little more structured than that. It's not just make crazy games. Each episode, but each class is one idea. So we'd say like this class is all about goals, and so all the exercise and activities will be focusing on how to shape your goals to get the feeling from the players you want. So, for instance, if I say there's a time limit, and when the time runs out, whoever has the most points wins, that's going to feel a lot different than whoever gets to 100 points wins. Because in one, you've got this pressure on you, and you're going to have a lot more adrenaline, and the people are going to be scrambling. They're going to be making suboptimal moves. Where in the other one, people might have more strategy. They really want to get the 100 points. They're going to be really looking around the table at everybody else, and so you're going to get maybe different kinds of interaction. So the same game with just switching the goal from, say, time-based to point-based will give the players a different feeling. And ultimately, as a game designer, you're really trying to shape people's emotions, shape how they feel, and give them kind of that experience that they're going to generate out of these pieces.
And I'm curious, does a time constraint make them perform better by any chance? Because they, like you say, they feel that in draining them to make the game or finish it faster. I don't know if that would actually mess up their quality. Oh,
of course. Yeah. And that's kind of one of the points. In a lot of cases, you will make bad moves if there's a timer on you, because you just have no choice. Like, you have to make your move. But that doesn't mean that's good or bad. It just means that the game designer has decided that they want people to make suboptimal moves, and maybe that's better for a party game. Maybe that's better for a game with a lot of people, because you don't want to sit around and wait for people to take their turns. So depending on the constraints, the audience that you're trying to reach, some of these things are going to be different. You want different tools to solve the problems.
Definitely. Now, what are your key principles for better game development?
It kind of varies between the size of the teams. So if you're, say, working all by yourself, and you don't have a deadline, then you have a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility. As soon as you put a deadline on yourself, that's kind of related to what we were just talking about. You might make decisions that maybe aren't the best, but you just got to get the thing out the door at a certain time. And so you're going to cut corners, and you're going to be maybe making decisions that you wish you didn't have to make. And this is true, like when I was working at EA. EA is very corporate, and they're really concerned about shareholder value and things like that. And so when it comes time to ship a game, you have a deadline, and EA is very good at hitting deadlines. They make a Madden every year. They make the Sims expansion packs. They're really good at coming out with pretty high quality content on very rigid schedules. But that's completely different than, let's say, you're working at another studio and you're just exploring stuff and you don't even know what the game is going to be like. So in those cases, you're just prototyping, you're throwing things up on the wall, seeing if they work or not. And it's really almost impossible to set a deadline because you don't even really know what you're trying to achieve.
And EA has a really bad rep with the consumers. And so it's crazy. I think they were voted one of the worst companies or something. They
had been several years ago, and I think it's undeserved.
Yeah, I think it's crazy.
They have a lot of games out, and so just to say across the board every single EA game ever made is bad, some are bad, some are good, but they're a company that's prolific. They're constantly releasing stuff. Mm-hmm. And, Madden is a huge seller every year. FIFA is one of the number one video games of the year. The Sims has sold more copies than almost any other game ever made. SimCity, a lot of these games have just been around forever, and people still love playing them. So, every now and then they come out with a game that maybe people don't like or it feels rushed. But any big company with a big portfolio is going to have that problem.
Oh, yeah. Now, creating a game can be very long and difficult, so I'm pretty sure you had some bad moments. Give us a personal experience of your most difficult moment, and it could be an obstacle or emotion you have to overcome. Be detailed and give us that story.
Yeah, so there's kind of two levels. So one would just be working on a game and then just having a setback. And I think every project I've worked on has had those. Earlier on in my career, when I was working on the Simpsons game at EA, which is one of the earlier games that I worked on, and I was still kind of a new designer at the time, I had made this list of all the stuff, all the people in Springfield and all the different things that I needed to be in the game and all the different buildings that you'd be able to go into. And I worked for like months trying to make this list of everything we would have in the game. And then the producer just basically said, you need to cut about like 70% of this.
Oh, no.
Because like when you really look at how much time it would take to get the animators and to get the voice acting and to get the modeling, the 3D modeling of all these assets, we just don't have enough time and money to ever do what you have spec'd out on paper. Of course, and it's really easy for a designer to write words on paper. Be like, that's cheap, right?
Yeah.
So, you got to just be kind of careful about that. But it was kind of heartbreaking where it's like, no, but you have to have this because otherwise it wouldn't be The Simpsons. And they're like, well, try to figure it out because we just can't do this. So I think that was kind of a big learning experience for me. And ever since then, whenever I design, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking it's like, I need to cut at least 50% of everything that I'm writing. And I just go into it with that attitude. And it's kind of good because in some ways it means that if you can make the cuts correctly, it means that your game will just be better. It's going to be focused on the most important content, and you're not going to have to waste a lot of time working on secondary stuff.
Yeah, and it sucks that that's the case where you're motivated and you want to put all these great ideas into it, and then all of a sudden they have to cut like more than 50%. I can imagine like that'd be really heartbreaking. And so what do you want to make sure game devs take away from an experience like this? Because it sounds like, I guess, game devs should not expect all the ideas will be implemented, and expect, I guess, more than half of the ideas might be cut at any moment. So what do you want to make sure they take away from this?
Well, part of it's going to be different with every project you work on, and you might be going into the project with a very rigid guide of what already needs to be done. And so as a designer, especially as an associate designer or somebody who's just starting out their career, you're already going to be scoped before you even start working on things. Somebody higher up level will have already figured that stuff out for you. But when you're in the prototype phase, when you're still trying to figure out what the project's even going to be like, everything's still wide open and you're actually trying to figure that out. And that's just part of the natural development cycle. I mean, that's just got to happen at some point. You only have a certain amount of money and a certain amount of time, a certain amount of people, and you've got to be juggling all of those, or your producer is going to be juggling those for you if you can't do it. But it's just really important just to kind of keep that in mind, that it's so easy to just imagine things, and it's really pretty easy then to write those things down on a piece of paper. But when you really put it in a spreadsheet and you do some project planning and you're like, okay, I want a fire hydrant and I want a sink and I want a fence and I want a mailbox. And you're like, okay, well, there's a week's worth of artist work right there. And these are all things that are just kind of background. They're not even important in the terms of what the game mechanics might be like or what the player experience is going to be like. So that's where you really have to kind of like watch out what you're investing your time and your resources into.
Now let's transition to your best investment. What is the best investment you've made? And it could be investment of money, time, or energy. And how did you decide to make that investment?
So I didn't really decide, but it's probably one of my best investments. Just happened over the years, which is learning to use Adobe Illustrator. And for the people who haven't used it, it's a vector drawing program. And unlike Photoshop, I'm sure a lot of your audience has used, you're drawing basically with lines and math instead of pixels. But I find like for so much stuff that I do, it's just the perfect tool. And since I've been using it for so long, I know all the keyboard shortcuts and I know, like where all the tools are, and I know like the best way to solve certain problems. I'm actually pretty fast and efficient at it now. But it enables me to communicate ideas with pictures really rapidly. And so if I want to try to explain something, sometimes with words, it could be a little difficult, but with one picture, you can actually get a lot of information, and then you're sure that everybody's seeing the same thing. Because one of the problems with words, and like when you write something down just in text and you give it to somebody to read, you can't be sure that their imagination is what you want them to be imagining.
Yeah.
Like they're going to read the words and they're going to have their own picture in their head. But if you can actually put the picture in front of them and then point to things, and they can point to things, and then you can get your pencil out and you can scribble on it and make changes right there, then you just can go really fast and making sure that everybody's in sync. So Adobe Illustrator is really, for me, that's the tool that I pretty much have open all day long, and I use it for just almost everything. I like constantly using it to solve problems.
Ooh, I would definitely link that up. Appreciate that. Now, the video game industry is booming, especially with the indie games on rise and VR slowly hitting mainstream. What is the one thing you are most excited about today?
I am kind of excited to see where VR goes, but it's already feels like, at least some of the articles I've been reading, that it's kind of on a little down slope right now, not an upslope. I mean, there's contradictory things about it, but in general, it hasn't really taken off like I think people had hoped a couple of years ago. But I think the technology, especially when you look at it in like bigger settings. So there's this place called The Void that they're opening up where it's more like an amusement park. You go into this warehouse and you put on the VR gear and it tracks everybody's bodies. And if you have like a gun in your hand, it actually is tracking that. And they can move the walls around. And so the walls all like slide around so they can actually build different mazes in different worlds. And you think you're outside, on this big field, and then you walk into a building and you can actually touch the walls and they're really there. But through the VR helmet, they look like something else.
Whoa.
So I think that's really exciting, like future, almost like amusement park or the future of arcades.
Have you tried something like that? I think there's already something like that, or at least a prototype of that. I'm thinking Australia, where, a group of two teams could go against each other in a virtual reality world and shoot each other and stuff like that. It's really cool. I really want to check something out like that.
Yeah, but that's gonna be one of those things that you probably won't put it in your living room. You'll pay $50 or something for an hour's worth of entertainment of running around, and it's kind of like the future of laser tag.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is your current favorite game?
I've been playing a lot of the PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds recently. A lot of my friends have too. Just something about it. It's kind of a little buggy and kind of rough around the edges, but still the core of that game I find to be really fun. It can be really tense at times. It can just be crazy at times. I don't really like to play it solo. In fact, most games that I play, I don't really like to play solo. I like to play with friends. And so that game works really well as a little team.
Awesome. Don't forget Game Devs. You can check out GameDevLoadout.com for all the show notes and links. You can also subscribe to my email list to get tips and updates. And now we have reached crunch time. Yes, that phase where game devs dread, but we are here to overcome it. Basically, I will ask you quick questions and you'll be giving us a ton of valuable answer in return, Stone. So are you ready to crush it and release the show?
Let's do it.
Awesome. What was holding you back from becoming a game developer?
Oh, I already am a game developer, so nothing's holding me back. I'm just going full speed.
Oh, nice. You're a game developer at heart.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
It's probably don't make enemies. The industry is just so small, and there's a lot of people working in it, but you keep bumping into the same people all the time. And kind of like Hollywood, like once the movie wraps, you got to go find a new production to work on. It's the same in video game industry. Like your game will ship and then you need a new place to go. And if you've made any enemies, people don't like you, your quality of work is low, then you're not going to get asked to join the next one. So being sociable, being friendly, being polite, being humble, like all of that stuff is going to really get you a lot farther.
Ooh, great advice. What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Some of it is not sleeping very much. I don't know if that's like the best habit to have, but a lot of the time when I really need to solve a problem, I'll just stay up late and not have the distractions and just kind of put my headphones on and just really get into it. And I think some of the best design work that I've done has actually been in that kind of moment. You get a little sleep deprived, which isn't healthy, but I find that just the lack of distractions really helps.
Interesting. So, if you don't mind me asking, how many hours of sleep do you usually get?
Well, most nights I'm okay. Most nights I can get 8. It depends on what mode I'm in. But I really only need about 5 hours of sleep a night. And so I can pretty much go for really long periods of time, which is 5 hours of sleep.
Okay. And don't forget game devs. It's different for each person. So, we don't recommend you doing that as well. You just got to find what fits for your type of energy.
Yeah, exactly.
And how has a failure set you up for later success?
So when I used to work at Blizzard, we were at Blizzard North, and that studio was up near San Francisco, and the main studio is down in Irvine, down towards LA. And they decided to shut down that studio where we were working on Diablo 3 and move everybody down to Irvine. and I didn't really want to move down. I have a family and kids, and it's just like I like the Bay Area. So there was this kind of moment of like, I'm giving up a job at Blizzard. This is like a really stupid thing to do, but my family, the schools, my wife's job, we have a house. So I think in some ways that like felt just really bad. Like there was no good decision to make there. But out of that, I ended up getting a job working at Spore at EA. And that was probably like one of the favorite projects that I've ever worked on. So it all turned out really well in the end.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And moving your whole family too to a whole nother place, it's a big commitment.
Yeah.
Share an internet resource.
Probably the Kama Sutra would be one of the great places just to get a lot of information about everything game development related. It's GAMA Sutra, and it's pretty much the industry's website. So it's not like a fan site like Kotaku or places like that. It's really just game developers writing essays and papers about lessons that they've learned. And it's programmers, artists, producers, designers, like everybody can contribute. And there's more stuff there than you could read in a lifetime.
Ooh, yeah, I need to check that out since I'm actually interviewing experienced game developers to learn more about their journey. Now, this next question is a doozy, so take your time if you need to. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to become a great game developer?
Well, first I'd make sure I had an internet connection. So
Yeah.
And then once I have that, then I think everything will just kind of take care of itself. But what I've found is that like people like to play games, and like I was saying earlier on, is like any kind of game. It doesn't have to be a computer game. And I think just the ability to go out and socialize and make friends through games is just really powerful. So probably just who I am and how I work. The first thing I would do is I would just try to make a simple game, and not even on a computer, and just try to find some like-minded people and just start playing it with them and talk about it and develop it. And hopefully that would then kind of lead into finding people who I could work with and start working on bigger projects.
And for those people that are big introverts, because I'm pretty sure you have students like this that aren't really social or have great interpersonal skills. So what advice could you give those people?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky in the sense that if you want to be a game designer, it kind of implies you're going to be working with a lot of people all the time. And if you're really introverted and you want to be a game designer, it might be difficult. It might not be a comfortable job for you to have because you're kind of up in front of a lot of people a lot of the time. Now, there's a lot of roles within game development, which you can be a little more introverted. Like you could be a great programmer, artist, and just kind of do your work at your desk. But the game designer, especially as you get up towards more lead designers, you're in front of people all the time. So I would just kind of question, like, if you're an introvert, then you might want to like think about other parts of game development than game design.
So Stone, I really appreciate this. Go ahead and give a parting piece of guidance in how we can connect with you.
So I'm pretty easy to find online. If you just search out my name, you can send me a Twitter message or a LinkedIn message or almost anything. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. And also, I have a website, stonetronics.com. And there's a lot of lectures and lessons from my classes and just pictures of games I've worked on, things like that. So if you're interested in some of the talks I've given at GDC over the years, the Stonetronics website's a great place to go.
Definitely check those out, Game Devs. And what's a parting piece of guidance?
Just keep making games. Just love what you do. And, just keep in mind that ultimately you're trying to make people happy and have a good time. And just don't stress out over that.
Yes, it's all about having fun. Stone, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And for that, we are truly grateful. I will post everything up on my website, so don't forget Game Devs to check that out. Stone, we look forward to your future work. And until then, we will catch you next time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Game Devs, for listening, and remember that knowledge is only potential power. Execution is the game. So equip yourself with the best loadout and take action today. Go check out GameDevLoadout.com for all the resources. I highly encourage you to contact me as well because I would love to hear your thoughts on the show. And if this podcast inspired you, I would greatly appreciate it if you spread the word to help the show grow. Until then, join me on the next episode. T-Chan out.